The first light of morning was still a gray idea in the sky when her day began. In the small, tidy apartment that smelled of lemon cleaner and yesterday's rice, she moved with a quiet efficiency. She checked on her son, a warm lump under a blanket covered in cartoon spaceships. A gentle touch to his hair, a straightening of the covers. This was the center of her world, this small boy with his quiet dreams. Her name was Maria, and for the last 3 years, her life had been a careful map drawn between 2 points, home and the base. Fort Steele stood tall and imposing, a place of sharp salutes, echoing footfalls, and machines with serious purposes. To the people who worked and trained
In this gym,
there,
we fight with discipline.
Maria was part of the scenery.
Every punch builds strength and
She wore
resilience.
simple blue pants
No
and a
excuses,
shirt
push through
with
the
a name
pain.
tag that just
Train
said
like a warrior,
Janitorial.
never back down.
Her cart, with its squeaky wheel, was a familiar sight. She emptied trash bins full of crumpled training schedules and coffee cups. She mopped floors that countless boots had marched across. She made the windows shine, through which you could see soldiers running in perfect formation. She spoke little, offering only small, polite smiles or a soft, "Good morning," if someone spoke to her first. Most did not. She was a ghost in the halls, there and then not, leaving behind the scent of disinfectant and order. Her real life, her loud and loving life, was for her son. Her thoughts, as she polished a railing to a high shine, were often on whether he had eaten his fruit at lunch, or if he needed new shoes. Her past was a locked box she never opened. Sometimes, when she was very tired, her right knee would give a dull ache. It was a weather vane for an old injury. If a soldier in the gym was doing particularly aggressive push-ups, the rhythm of it would subconsciously make her feet shift, ever so slightly, into a more balanced stance. It was a whisper from another life. A life where she was not Maria the janitor, but Maria the Storm Vega, a name called over loudspeakers in arenas far away. That person, with her medals and her dazzling judogi, felt like someone she had read about in a book once. That life ended with a sickening pop in her knee during a tournament, and later, a relationship that started like a fairy tale and ended with her hiding her passport, clutching her infant son, and running towards a fresh start where no one would think to look for a champion. One afternoon, her cleaning route took her past the open doors of the base gym. Inside, a mixed martial arts class for civilians was underway. She paused for a moment, unseen in the doorway, watching the awkward but enthusiastic movements. A young soldier, leaning against the wall with his friends, snorted loudly. "Look at them," he said, his voice carrying. "A bunch of office workers playing at being tough. My grandma has better form." His friends laughed. "Yeah? They think this make-believe stuff would work on someone like Sergeant Cade?" He'd fold them in half. Maria's hands tightened on the handle of her mop. The words were not meant for her, but they scraped against a deep, old part of her soul. Martial arts, to her, had never been about being tough. It was about discipline. It was about control. It was about using a larger person's energy against them, a lesson she had used far too often in her old life to escape a grabbing hand. She pushed the memory away, along with her cart, the squeaky wheels screaming in the quiet hall. Her escape was her son. Picking him up from school was the brightest part of her day. His face would light up, and he would run to her, a backpack bouncing, talking a mile a minute about planets and dinosaurs, and what his friend had for lunch. That evening, as she helped him with his reading, he looked up at her with his big, dark eyes. "Mommy, Jake said his dad is a soldier, and he fights bad guys. What do you do at the base? Do you fix the tanks?" Maria smoothed his hair. "No, baby. I don't fix the tanks. I clean the places where the soldiers learn to be smart and strong. I help keep it ready for them. It's important?" He asked, needing to know. "It is," she said, and she meant it. It was honest work. It put food on their table. but a tiny, buried part of her felt a pang. She once taught people how to be strong too, not just in their bodies, but in their minds. Now she cleaned the floors they trained on. Later, with her son asleep, Maria sat in the quiet living room. From a small box on the top shelf of her closet, she took out a single photograph. It was worn at the edges. In it, a younger version of herself, fierce and smiling, stood on a podium, a silver medal around her neck, her country's flag raised behind her. The woman in the photo looked like a stranger, a person made of fire and confidence. Maria traced the image with her finger. That girl had no idea she would end up here, in this peaceful, tired quiet, finding a different kind of strength in the weight of a mop and the sound of her son's steady breathing. She put the photo away, locking the box and the past back inside. Tomorrow was another early day. There were floors to mop, bins to empty, and a life to build, one clean, quiet square at a time. The ghost in the halls would return to her work, her secret strength hidden in plain sight, in the steady set of her shoulders and the careful, balanced way she moved through the world. The buzz around Fort Steele was different that Friday. You could feel it in the air, a kind of electric excitement that even hummed through the quiet hallways Maria mopped. It was the day of the annual Warrior Night. For the soldiers, it was a big deal, a show of strength and skill, a break from routine. For Maria, it just meant the gym would be a much bigger mess to clean afterward. That evening, after her shift was officially over, she sat high up in the bleachers, waiting. Her son was with a trusted neighbor for a few extra hours. Down on the brightly lit gym floor, soldiers and their families cheered. There were demonstrations of brute force breaking stacks of boards, lifting heavy weights. There were displays of sharp, precise rifle drills. The air smelled like sweat, popcorn, and Polish dot Maria watched with a professional eye, the way a chef might watch someone else cook. She saw the power, but she also saw the tiny flaws. A foot placed a little wrong, a balance that was just a hair off. It was the old habit of a competitor, and she quietly chided herself for it. She was here to work, not to judge. The main event was a series of sparring matches. The last one featured the sergeant everyone talked about, Cade. He was a mountain of a man, with a reputation for being as hard as the base's name. His opponent was a younger soldier, lean and quick, with a technical style that relied on speed. The match started well. The younger man was dodging, using fancy footwork. But you could see it wasn't working. Cade was like a bulldozer, patiently closing the space. Then the younger soldier saw an opening. He moved in for a throw, a classic technique to use Cade's own size against him. But Cade, frustrated and wanting to end the show, didn't play along. Instead of going with the throw, he stiffened and twisted in midair, a dangerous and forbidden move in training. He used his raw power to reverse it, flipping the younger soldier upside down. The kid's head and neck were now aimed straight for the hard mat, with all of Cade's weight driving him down. It wasn't a winning move. It was a move that could break a neck. A gasp shot through the crowd. The referee, a fellow soldier, froze for a critical second. Maria didn't think. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. Years of training, of watching for safe form, of a deep, instinctive understanding of the physics of bodies, took over. From the bleachers, her voice, usually so soft, cut through the noise like a knife. Asterisk mat. Asterisk, it was the Japanese command for stop, spoken with an authority that surprised even her. The gym fell silent. 200 heads turned, looking up, searching for the source of the shout. They found a small woman in simple blue janitorial clothes, standing rigid. Her face pale, but her eyes locked on the scene below. On the mat, Cade had stopped, the younger soldier dangling dangerously in his grip. He looked up, confused. Then he saw her. His face shifted from confusion to a red, prickly annoyance. A laugh, harsh and humorless, burst from him, echoing in the quiet space. "What did you say?" He boomed, letting his opponent stumble to his feet, rubbing his neck. "You got something to say, cleaning lady? You want to come down here and say it?" The crowd tittered, a nervous release of tension. Maria felt every pair of eyes on her. She felt the heat rising in her cheeks. She wanted to melt into the bleacher seats, to become the ghost again. But then she saw the younger soldier, still massaging his throat, his eyes wide with the shock of almost being seriously hurt. She saw the commanding officer, a man with graying hair named Colonel Hayes, watching her intently, not with anger, but with a sharp curiosity. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the last thing she needed. Attention. Trouble. But a deeper, older part of her, the part that respected the art, the part that was a teacher long before she was a mother or a janitor, refused to back down. She had to make them see Dot. She took a slow breath, trying to keep her voice from shaking. She didn't address Cade. She looked straight at Colonel Hayes, her voice clear and steady in the huge, silent room. "Sir, that throw, the kata guruma, it is not for smashing. It is for control. The way he did it is dangerous. It can paralyze a training partner." Cade threw his hands up. "Oh, come on. It's a combat sport. You think the enemy plays by rules?" Still ignoring him, Maria kept her eyes on the colonel. An idea formed, desperate and terrifying. "With respect, sir, let me show you the correct way to neutralize that attack, to make it safe." A roar of disbelief and excitement went up from the soldiers. This was better than the planned show. Cade grinned, a wide, challenging grin. He cracked his knuckles. "You serious? You want a piece of this? In your little uniform?" Colonel Hayes held up a hand, silencing the room. He studied Maria for what felt like an eternity. He had seen her around for years. Quiet, never a problem, always working. He saw no madness in her eyes, only a fierce, serious certainty. He also knew a training accident on Warrior Night would be a disaster. He gave a single, slow nod. "All right," he said, his voice carrying. "Sergeant, you will spar. Light contact only. Rules of engagement. Let's see what she means." Maria's knees felt weak as she made her way down the bleachers. The sea of faces blurred around her. All she could hear was the rushing of blood in her own ears. As she stepped onto the edge of the mat, she kicked off her sensible work shoes. Someone offered her a judogi, the heavy white training jacket. She shook her head. Her work pants and t-shirt would have to do. Cade stood across from her, towering, smirking. "Don't worry, Mom," he said loudly for the crowd. "I'll go easy on you." Maria said nothing. She bent her knees slightly, her feet settling into a natural, balanced stance. She brought her hands up, not in fists, but open, relaxed. She took one last, deep breath and let the noise of the world fall away. The gym, the staring people, the fear it all faded into a distant hum. There was only the mat, a mountain of a man in front of her, and the silent, flowing language of motion she had known since she was a child. The ghost was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. The air in the gym was thick and silent, heavy with disbelief. All the earlier cheers and shouts had been swallowed up, leaving only the hum of the lights and the soft shuffle of Maria's socks on the mat. She stood across from the Sergeant Cade, who looked less like a soldier now and more like a confused bear who'd found a butterfly in his path. He shifted his weight, his smirk still there, but not as sure as before. "Okay then," Cade said, his voice too loud for the quiet room. "Let's get this over with." He moved forward, not with the careful skill of a trained martial artist, but with the straightforward charge of a man used to overpowering things. He reached out a big hand to grab the front of Maria's shirt, a simple move to control her. But as his fingers were about to close on the fabric, Maria wasn't there anymore. It was the slightest movement, a turn of her hips, and a smooth step to the side, like a door swinging open. His hand closed on empty air, making him stumble forward a step. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Cade turned, his face reddening. This time he came in lower, aiming to wrap his arms around her middle in a tackle. Maria didn't back up. She met him. As his arms went around her, she didn't push against his strength. She flowed with it. One hand went to his elbow, the other to his shoulder, and she used his own forward momentum to guide him. It was like redirecting a river. With a twist of her body, Cade was spun around, his grip broken, and he found himself facing the opposite direction, off balance and bewildered. The murmur from the soldiers grew louder. This wasn't fighting. Not the way they understood it. There were no punches, no kicks, no grunts of effort. Maria moved with a quiet, terrible grace. Every time Cade pushed, she yielded. Every time he grabbed, she slipped away, her movements circular and soft. She was showing them Ru no Kata, the principle of softness, controlling hardness. It was as if she was dancing with a partner who only knew how to stomp, and she was leading. Cade was getting frustrated. The laughter was gone from his eyes, replaced by a hard, focused anger. He wasn't playing around anymore. With a growl, he charged again, this time aiming to lift her clean off her feet with the same rough, dangerous throw he'd tried before, the kataguruma, the shoulder wheel. This was the moment. This was what she had stopped Dot as his arms went around her legs, and he started to heave her up. Maria didn't panic. Her mind, honed by 10,000 repetitions, went still and clear. Her left hand shot to his right elbow, locking it. Her right arm wrapped around his neck, not to choke, but to control. It was not a block, but a connection. Then she did the most beautiful and frightening thing the soldiers had ever seen. Instead of resisting his lift, she helped him. She jumped slightly, adding to his momentum. For a split second, Cade had her in the air, exactly where he wanted her. But in that same second, Maria controlled the entire flight. She arched her body, becoming a wheel. She guided his force, turning his brutal lift into a soaring, spinning arc. He was no longer throwing her. He was part of the throw. The world turned upside down for the big sergeant. He was airborne, flying horizontally over Maria's shoulder. But there was no crash, no sickening crack of bone on mat. As he descended, Maria followed him down, her grip never leaving his arm and neck. She guided his fall, softening the impact, controlling his head and spine so they never touched the ground. His back and shoulders landed on the mat with a heavy, controlled thud that echoed in the silent gym. He lay there for a second, blinking at the ceiling lights, completely unhurt, but utterly conquered. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in another building. Then. It broke. It wasn't a cheer at first. It was a collective gasp that turned into a roar. Soldiers were on their feet, not knowing who to look at: the giant sergeant lying dazed on the mat, or the small woman in janitor's clothes standing calmly beside him, breathing evenly as if she'd just taken a stroll. Whistles and shouts of disbelief filled the air. Someone started clapping, and then everyone was, the sound thunderous and overwhelming. Maria stepped back, her moment of fierce focus fading. The noise rushed back in, a wall of sound that almost made her dizzy. She looked down at Cade, who was now sitting up, rubbing his shoulder, a completely new expression on his face. It wasn't anger. It was a pure, stunned shock, mixed with something that looked like respect. Colonel Hayes was the first person to step onto the mat. He didn't go to Cade. He walked right up to Maria, his eyes wide. He looked from her to the sergeant and back again. "What," he said slowly, over the din, "was that?" Before Maria could answer, the world descended. Soldiers swarmed the edge of the mat. Phones were out. Voices were shouting questions. "Did you see that? Who is she?" That was insane. In the chaos, Maria saw the younger soldier she had protected. He was looking at her, and he brought his hand up in a crisp, formal salute. Not because of her rank, she had none, but because of what she had just done. Maria felt exposed, like a creature pulled from deep water into blinding sun. The ghost was gone, and she was completely, terrifyingly visible. She gave a small, almost helpless look to Colonel Hayes. The colonel understood. He held up his hands to the crowd. "All right. Settle down. Show's over. Everyone, clear out. Give her some air." As the crowd, still buzzing with excitement, began to slowly shuffle out, talking loudly about what they'd just witnessed, Maria stood alone in the center of the bright, empty space. Her secret, the quiet box she had kept locked for so long, was now blown wide open, and its contents were all over the floor for everyone to see. The controlled thud of the sergeant hitting the mat still seemed to echo in her ears, louder than any cheer. Her real work, it seemed, was just beginning. The quiet of Maria's apartment the next morning felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a storm. Her son chattered about his night with a neighbor, completely unaware that his mother's small, careful world had just been turned inside out. She made his breakfast, her hands moving on autopilot. The normal sounds, the clink of a spoon, the toast popping up, seemed too loud. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It came just after she dropped her son at school. Her phone buzzed. It was a number from the base, but not one she recognized. The voice on the other end was formal. "Ms. Vega? Colonel Hayes would like to see you in his office at 0900. Not a request. A summons. The walk across the base felt longer than ever. Before, she was invisible. Now, she was a magnet for every pair of eyes. Soldiers she'd passed for years without a glance now did double takes. She heard the whispers, pieces of sentences that hung in the air. "That's her." The video. Through Sergeant Cade. Her face grew hot. She kept her eyes straight ahead, her back straight. The way she used to walk onto a competition mat. Colonel Hayes's office was neat and serious, just like the man. Pictures of planes and ships lined the walls. He didn't sit behind his big desk. He was standing by the window, and he gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs in front of it. He looked at her, not with anger, but with a deep, puzzled curiosity. "First," he said, his voice steady, "Sergeant Williams is fine. A little sore in his pride, mostly. And Private Lewis, the young man you were. Concerned about... He's also fine. Thanks to you." Maria just nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "What I need to understand, Miss Vega," the colonel continued, sitting across from her, "is what exactly happened in my gym last night. That wasn't a lucky move. That was years. A decade, maybe. Who are you?" There was no point hiding anymore. The ghost was gone. Maria took a slow breath. "My name is Maria Vega. Before I came here, I was a judoka. For the Philippines national team." The words felt strange in her mouth, like speaking a forgotten language. She didn't have a medal with her. But she had her old, cracked phone. With fingers that trembled slightly, she pulled up a photograph. It was buried deep in a cloud folder she never opened. She passed the phone to him. The colonel took it. On the screen was a young woman, drenched in sweat, beaming a triumphant, exhausted smile. A heavy silver medal hung around her neck. Her country's flag was raised behind her. The woman's eyes were full of a fire that the quiet woman sitting before him kept carefully banked. He looked from the photo to Maria and back. The resemblance was clear, but the person in the photo seemed like a different species, all public glory and fierce light. "This is you," he stated, more to himself than to her. "Yes." "Sir?" The story came out then in short, simple sentences. The years of training since she was a child. The dream of the Olympics. The sickening pop in her knee during a qualifying match that ended it all. Then, the whirlwind romance with a charming man who slowly became a prison, his jealousy a locked door. She told him about finding out she was pregnant, about the fear, about hiding her passport and taking a bus to a new town with a baby, and nothing else. She told him why she chose this base, this quiet job, because it was steady, because it was anonymous, because it kept her son safe and fed. She did not cry. Her voice was quiet and flat, just stating facts. But Colonel Hayes, a man who had seen many kinds of strength, heard the tremendous force it took to voice those facts at all. He handed the phone back to her, silent for a long moment. He looked out the window at the soldiers running drills on the field below. "That skill you have," he said finally, turning back to her. "That understanding. It's not just about throwing people. It's about control, about using an opponent's energy, about balance." He leaned forward. "My soldiers are strong, some of the strongest in the world. But sometimes strength makes you stupid. It makes you think the only way through a wall is to ram it head first." Maria stayed quiet, listening. "I'm offering you a job," he said plainly. "Not as a janitor, as a civilian contractor, a specialist. I want you to teach a weekly class. Not how to fight, they know that. I want you to teach them what you showed Sergeant Williams. How to move, how to fall safely, how to think about force differently." Maria's mind went blank. Then it filled with a storm of objections. "Sir, I have my son. My schedule, the cleaning shifts." "The pay would be significantly better," the colonel said. "Almost double. The hours would be set, daytime, no more midnight mopping. You'd have benefits. Real health care for you and your boy." The words hung in the air. Asterisk double the pay. Daytime hours. Healthcare. Asterisk. It was everything she had been quietly aching for. It was a chance to be home for dinner every night, to read bedtime stories, to not be so tired her bones ached, to take her son to the dentist without panic. But the cost was terror. It meant standing in front of those men, all those eyes, and being seen. It meant opening up the box of her past and letting it become her present. It meant no more hiding. I need to think about it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Of course," Colonel Hayes said, standing up. "Take the day. The offer stands. But Ms. Vega, that kind of skill, that kind of mind, it's a gift, and a gift isn't meant to be kept in a closet with the mops and buckets." Maria walked out of the office in a daze. The rest of her cleaning shift was a blur. Her mop moved over the same spot twice. She emptied a trash can. It was already empty. Her mind was a battlefield. One side saw her son's face, the chance for a better life, the respect in the colonel's eyes. The other side saw Sergeant Cade's smirk, the laughing soldiers from the gym doorway, the terrifying vulnerability of being known. That night, after her son was asleep, she didn't take out the photo. Instead, she sat on the edge of his bed and watched him sleep. His chest rose and fell, peaceful and sure. She thought about the word the colonel had used. A gift. Was it a gift? It felt like a burden for so long. A secret to carry. A reminder of a broken dream. But last night, for a moment, it hadn't felt like a burden. It had felt like truth. Her body had remembered what it was to speak its native language. And in doing so, she had protected someone. She thought about teaching. Not showing off, not fighting, but teaching the way her old sensei had taught her, with patience, with principle. She thought about a soldier, maybe using something she taught him to stay safe one day, to come home to his own family. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But underneath it, something else was stirring, something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the fiery ambition of her youth. It was quieter. It was the shape of a door opening, and a small, stubborn hope walking through. The fear did not leave Maria. On the morning of her first class, it sat in her stomach like a cold stone. She dropped her son at school, his little hand waving goodbye, oblivious to the storm inside her. Walking on to the base felt different. She wasn't heading to the supply closet for her cart. She was carrying a small gym bag, and her path led to Training Room 3. The notice had been posted. Principles of Balance and Controlled Force. Instructor M. Vega. The room was already full when she arrived. Not just full, packed. Soldiers in gray t-shirts and shorts lined the walls, sat on the floor, stood in the back. She recognized faces from Warrior Night, buzzing with curiosity. And there, right in the front, taking up a lot of space, was Sergeant Cade. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. The chatter died down to a low hum as she walked in. Every eye was on her. The cleaning lady. The ghost. The woman who threw a mountain. For a second, she wanted to turn around. The old instinct to hide, to be small, was a scream in her ears. But then she remembered her son's question. Asterisk, is your job important? She set her bag down quietly in the corner. She didn't walk to the center of the mat. She stood near the edge, facing them. The silence was heavy, waiting for a show. Good morning, she said. Her voice didn't boom. It was her normal, quiet voice, and they had to lean in to hear it. My name is Maria. For this class, you will not call me ma'am or miss. You will call me by my name. She let that sit for a moment. We will not be fighting today. We will not be learning how to throw anyone. Not yet. A few faces fell, disappointed. The first thing you must learn, she continued, her eyes sweeping over them, is how to be thrown. How to fall. In Japanese, it is called yukimi. It is the most important lesson. Because if you do not know how to fall safely, you will be afraid to try. You will get hurt. You will hurt your partner. So today, we learn to fall. She saw the skepticism. Big, tough soldiers learning to fall? Cade shifted his weight, a frown on his face. Maria ignored it. She moved to the center of the mat. The ground is not your enemy. It is a fact. We will meet it with respect. She demonstrated, dropping to one knee, then rolling over her shoulder and coming back to her feet in one smooth, fluid motion. It looked easy. It looked soft. You do not fight the ground. You greet it. You spread the impact like this. She did it again, slower, explaining the curve of her spine, the slap of her arm to disperse the energy. Then she had them try. It was chaos at first. Grown men, strong enough to lift huge weights, stumbling and crashing awkwardly. Thuds and grunts filled the air. Maria moved among them, not as a distant expert, but as a guide. She knelt beside a young private who was landing on his elbow. Here, she said softly, placing a hand on his back. The energy should travel along this line, not into your joint. Try to be round like a ball. Her touch was confident, her instructions clear. She came to Cade. He was trying to muscle through it, hitting the mat with a loud, stiff slam. You are fighting it, she said, standing next to him. You are trying to win against the floor. You cannot win against the floor. He looked up at her, sweat on his brow. It feels wrong, he grunted. Because you are used to being hard, she replied simply. Today, you practice being soft. Soft is not weak. Soft is smart. Again, and this time, breathe out when you roll. To everyone's surprise, the big sergeant listened. He tried again. It was still clumsy, but it was quieter. The crash became a controlled thump. A small victory. For the rest of the hour, they fell. They rolled. They got up and fell again. The room filled with the sounds of breathing and the rhythm of bodies meeting the mat with less fear. Maria weaved between them, correcting a hand here, demonstrating a roll there. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. They were listening. Near the end of class, she called them all together. What you practice today is not just for the mat, she said. It is for when you trip. It is for when you are pushed. It is for letting go of the idea that being strong means never yielding. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is yield correctly, so you can get back up without being broken. The dismissal was quiet. The soldiers got up, dusting themselves off, talking in low, thoughtful voices. As they filed out, several of them nodded to her. Thank you, Maria, a few said. The words were simple, but they felt solid, real. Cade was the last to leave. He walked up to her, his usual swagger subdued. He stood for a moment, seeming to search for words. Finally, he just stuck out his hand. She took it. His handshake was firm, but not crushing. Next week, he said, not a question, a statement. We learn the throw? A small, real smile touched Maria's lips for the first time. Maybe. First, you must learn to fall better. He almost smiled back, a quick twitch at the corner of his mouth. Then he gave a short, sharp nod and left. Maria packed her bag alone in the now empty room. The silence was different from the silence of the hallways she used to clean. This was a peaceful, earned quiet. As she left, she passed a window looking out onto the base. She saw Sergeant Cade outside, showing a younger soldier the rolling motion, his big hand surprisingly gentle as he corrected the other man's posture. She walked to the school to pick up her son. When he saw her, he ran as always. Mommy, how is your new teaching? She took his hand, feeling the small, warm weight of it. It was good, she said, and she meant it. It was important. That evening, she didn't put the photo of her younger self away in a box. She placed it on the bookshelf in the living room, beside her son's favorite storybook. Two pieces of her life, sitting side by side. Maria Vega no longer moved like a ghost through Fort Steele. She walked with a quiet certainty. The soldiers no longer saw just the janitor. They saw the teacher. They saw the woman who understood that true strength was a flexible thing, a balance between power and grace, between standing firm and knowing how to fall. She was still a mother, still a protector. But now, she was also a guide, helping others find their balance, one safe fall at a time. The storm of her past was no longer locked away. It was a steady wind at her back, pushing her, and now her students forward.